Hi, Chris DeLeon here with Hobby Game Dev, and I've received a question on Twitter recently that reminded me that even though I often kind of assume in my material that people are going from solo development to build up towards team projects, there are other folks who maybe already have professional experience on a team looking to transition back to doing solo development and figure out then how to adjust to that. So the question I received was specifically, what project management or sort of development strategies do I recommend for someone trying to manage their own work as a solo developer? And I'm going to break this into 5 bits, 5 parts. The first of which is that you've got to learn to lead yourself just like you would lead someone else, or manage yourself just like you would have to manage someone else. So that means that you actually want to separate out the time you spend thinking about what to do from the time you spend figuring out how to do it, or actually doing it. So whether it's a morning thing, whether it's a certain hour of the day, whether it's a certain day of the week, you want to be able to really separately put on that producer hat and think about what's the schedule, what are the upcoming milestones, the deadlines, major and minor, when's the overall project supposed to be shaping up, what's your plan B look like to mitigate risk, so if something derails, how do you keep the project on track, and then figuring out from there, what are the tasks that need to happen within the next week, or whatever your time frame is, sort of per byte, or sort of per review period, for design, for art, for programming, for audio, and so on, so that then you can sort of lean on those plans without having to worry about it will all fit together because you figured it out when you had your producer hat on. Also, as part of that, if you would communicate your work externally, to communicate that work to someone else, so if you'd put it on the whiteboard, if you would print it out, if you'd write it in pen, if you'd make a table or a chart, or however you would do it, it's still valuable to do that for yourself, because producer you and implementer you won't exist at the exact same time. Does that make sense? You want to be able to reference the plans and communications from past you as future you doing the implementing, to know exactly what instructions to follow and to free up your mind and resources, because we're tempted sometimes, if it's all in our head, to just trust that that's going to be enough. But while it's in our head, it's easily changed, and maybe more importantly, that's mental attention and energy better sort of reallocated for doing the project, for thinking through the art, through thinking through the programming challenges and the design issues at hand. Now, part 2 of that, which rolls directly from it, is that you need to be a good leader for yourself. You need to focus on clarity, on keeping things high level. You need to be willing to push yourself and to be demanding, while also being reasonable and realistic about it. So, maybe you've only had experience as a lead, and now you're trying to do something as your own implementation as well. It's really, it's nice to be pushed. It's nice to have a chance to grow in a project. And so even if you're setting goals you don't quite always achieve, that's not necessarily a failure metric. If you're hitting 85, 90% of your goals, well, maybe you're kind of right where you want to be. So set realistic plans, set them fair, but do kind of push yourself and be a good manager to yourself. Now, part 3 is the flip side of that, which is to say you got to be a good employee to yourself. So you got to trust when you're doing your programming, when you're doing design, when you're doing your artwork, that producer you, when you made those plans, knew what he or she was talking about in terms of making sure that things would come together, as long as you just do the task that you're assigned, freeing you up to really focus your attention on what that current task is. Now, part of that can also include pushback. And so, you're really as senior level as it's going to be on your team of one, as a producer, or as a designer, as an artist, as a programmer, in that all of the code, all of the other art in the project, all of the other sound and so on. And so you understand those challenges in a way. We can actually treat this just like you would in a workplace. So there's an old rule of thumb that if you're sort of the implementation specialist, you don't actually tell your manager, producer no, or you don't tell them, I'm going to do it a different way. What you do is you inform them and you bring them in on the loop and say, well, okay, based on something we didn't know about at the time when that plan was made, here's the trade-offs that we're currently in a position to make. So if we stayed with plan X, it would cost us Y days and have complication Z associated with it. But we might also want a way that if we did instead plan A, like I've outlined here, it might take only B days and have side effects or risks C associated with it. So position those sort of trade-offs and then get back to focusing on the tasks at hand as designer, as artist, as whatever your content focuses at the time. And then when you're back in producer mode, weigh those trade-offs, just like you would if it was made by somebody separate from yourself. Now, part 4 is to recognize, though, that even though you're kind of playing the roles of many people, you have to accept that unless you're Leonardo da Vinci, you're just not going to be equally good at everything. Maybe art isn't your strong suit. Maybe audio isn't. Maybe design isn't. Or maybe you're struggling to program. Whatever it is, you need to sort of lower your standards, your expectations of production quality if you're used to working on a team of people who devote all of their years of training and practice and experience to each isolated category. Now, there's sort of two sides to this coin, because on the one hand, players won't care. Players won't notice or appreciate whether it's one person or 5 people or 20 or 200. They might care a little bit that it's sort of got an indie flavor to it, but at the end of the day, if adding an extra person would make a big difference for you, they won't care if you did it all. But the other side of that coin is that you can be clever about this. You can really be resourceful about it. So maybe you don't draw good art that looks painterly, but maybe you can make vector art that's really sort of engaging, because you can use your programming skills to leverage a new style that someone else can't pull off. Or maybe, at the very least, you can do sort of a layered approach. So make something that's good enough for now, for audio or for art, as a functional placeholder to let you keep rolling on, to let you keep moving forward. And then later on, if your project picks up steam through attention on YouTube, through succeeding in festivals and released in beta, you can then use that to help position yourself to work with a new collaborator who can then just focus on replacing in your animations, replacing your audio. And otherwise, you've got something there which is enough to pivot on and keep moving forward. Now, the fifth and final part is to acknowledge, and this is, again, off an extension of that unlike on a real project, so on a project where you've got a team to worry about, you want to keep everyone's hands full. You want to always make sure there's something to do for art, something to do for design, something to do for the programmer. But in this case, when you're a solo developer, time that you're spent idling and repeating and iterating on art is time that your lead engineer isn't working either. That's time that you're not making progress on audio or level design. And so you got to start making these trade-offs very conscientiously about what do you do best, what do you do well that you can really use as a strength at the core of the project, and how can the rest of your skills be used to supplement and support and build around that, as opposed to getting in the way of it. And so, if you're just not that good at sound, A, don't pick yourself a project that's really sound dependent, but B, don't let yourself get hung up on the fact that you're not good at it. Like I said from number 4, do sound that's good enough to let you go back to doing the things you do well, to be able to bring your project together and really, like I say, build off your strengths, and you want to design around that. So again, we've got 5 things. You want to lead yourself just like you would lead anybody else. You want to be a good leader to yourself and all that entails. You want to be a good employee to yourself and trust the leader that you are the previous day of the week or the previous hour of the day. You want to be realistic about your limitations as only one person trying to do so many completely different styles of skills, and try to find clever ways to work around that. And then last, you want to be careful about how you allocate that time between the different skills to really play to your strengths, to do the things that you can do well, and let your project let those things shine and support them. So I hope that this is helpful to you. Hopefully it's of some use to some other folks out there. I really appreciate the question via Twitter or via email or any other form people want to send me questions. It helps direct these entries into new directions that I'm sure other folks out there are wondering the same things. Once again, that's Chris DeLeon for Hobby Game Dev. Thank you for tuning in. If you're not subscribed, I'd appreciate it if you do. And I'll have some more content up for you soon. Thanks.